Let's continue with your calls. Rebecca is in Salford. Hi, Rebecca. Now,
Hi, Ian.
Who do you want to see as leader of the Labour Party?
Me.
Becky Long Bailey.
That would have been a headline if you'd said somebody else, wouldn't it?
No, there's only one me. Definitely one to choose.
Now, how important was it to you to get the endorsement of the CWU?
It was hugely important. I mean, they're such a great union and they've been campaigning for their workers who've been going through a terrible time under the current government. So to get their support, particularly because they'd been helping with a lot of the big ideas, the big policies that had been developing over the last few years, from the Green Industrial Revolution through to bringing Royal Mail back into public ownership. So it was hugely important to get their confidence, really.
And in terms of the trade union proposals, work proposals that were in the Labour manifesto, are all those going to, if you become Labour leader, are all of those going to still be valid, or will you want to tweak things?
No, they'll all be within my policy programme going forward. But one of the things that we fell down on in the general election, aside from Brexit and many of the other issues that I'm sure you're going to be talking about tonight, it was that inability to articulate what many of our manifesto policies would do for people's lives, and certainly the trade unions and the workers' right policies. It was all about improving quality of life and security for our communities, really. So when we go into another general election, we've got to have that message where we talk to our people and tell them that we're the party that's about raising up their aspirations and making sure that they can achieve that quality of life that they should be having now.
See, that's really interesting, because I've always thought that successful political leaders are leaders who can articulate optimism and aspiration. And I think that is one area where Jeremy Corbyn really fell down. And I haven't really heard any of the other leadership candidates say that in the way that you just did.
No, and that's right. And one of the things that certainly struck me was we've talked a lot about helping those who were, struggling to make ends meet and those that were being attacked by the government through their austerity programme. But we didn't talk about how the vast majority of people were feeling. Many people, they've got jobs, they feel happy, they want to do better. They don't want to be told that their life is terrible and we're going to save them from themselves and remove the scales from their eyes. But they want a government that gives them that aspiration that says, look, we'll help you do better. We'll make sure that your children have a secure, happy life going forward, and your children's life will always be better than yours. And that's what we were going to do through our policies, but that wasn't what people were hearing on the doorstep, unfortunately.
Becky, can I just ask a question? First of all, when we endorsed...
This is going to be a zinger.
No, when we endorsed Becky, we took the most democratic decision of any of the trade unions. So we got all of our branches together. We asked all of the candidates to write in response to a number of questions about their future policies and how they would run the party. And it was our branches, over 500 people in a meeting, who had a vote on any of the candidates that they wanted to select from. And Becky won that vote decisively, along with Angela Rayner as a ticket. And that's a unifying ticket in my view. The question I was going to ask you, Becky, is what would you do then to change that perception of Labour? Because I agree with you, the policies are the right policies. What would you do in terms of communications? And how would you approach getting that message out there and rebuilding trust with the electorate?
I mean, there's many things that we've got to do. So first of all, we've got to have a big vision. We've only ever won an election when we've been talking about what the future would look like rather than how bad the Tories are and how we're going to be a little bit less worse than they are. So we've got to have those big visions. And we had things such as the Green Industrial Revolution in the last manifesto, which talked about reindustrialising huge regions right across the United Kingdom and providing the jobs of the future and improving people's homes and making sure that they were, whatever their income group, they were able to access electric vehicles and home insulation and things like that. But it's also about recognising that we've got to speak the language of our communities. And I always think about what I would think, if I went back, 30 years and I was talking to myself. We were struggling as a family, but we were proud. We never wanted anyone to think we were struggling. And I never thought that we were poor or we were working class. It's only when I look back now that I realise, actually we were. So we didn't need to be told that we needed to be saved, but we wanted to know that the future was going to look bright. And that's the kind of messaging that we need to have for our communities, that message of real aspiration and not individual aspiration, because sometimes we just think about social mobility and, the odd person being lucky enough to climb a ladder. This is about impressing on people that aspiration is about us all rising up. So whatever your job, wherever you live, whatever your parents do, whatever your postcode, we'll all rise up and you'll have that decent quality of life and that standard of living. And that's what government should be about. It should be about betterment of its people. And we've lost hope in the government ever being able to do that over the last 10 years, certainly.
See, it's really interesting what you've said in the last few minutes, because you're coming across in a completely different way to me than you did at the beginning of this leadership campaign. It's almost as if you've kind of discovered your mojo. Do you feel like that?
I'm just being myself. I mean, it's difficult. When you're in the shadow cabinet, you're bound by collective responsibility and you've always got to go out with the message that you're supposed to go out with. Sometimes I felt like I was the only person going out with the message at times. That was part of the problem. But now I feel like I'm able to be myself and say what I think, our country should look like. And I have been saying this in the background, but I think I've been one voice of many, whereas now I've got the opportunity to lead and lead an entire shadow cabinet and party to be able to deliver that message. But, what we were asking for in the manifesto, and this is one of the things that really upset me. We were always told that, bringing certain utilities into public ownership, making sure that workers felt secure. These were radical policies, and they're not radical policies. Other countries around the world do them already, and they provide a better standard of living for their people than we do. And I expect our government to do that, that's what the role of government should be.
But these are policies that were rejected by the electorate. You had the worst election results since 1935, and I haven't seen any of the four remaining candidates, including you, really get to grips with why you lost that election. Yes, it was partly to do with Brexit, but it was also due to your policy platform. Not maybe.
Where's your evidence?
Hang on a second. Well, my evidence is
that the policies weren't popular in themselves.
Well, they didn't cohere together, did they? That was the problem.
There was no overall narrative.
There might have been individually popular policies, but nobody believed all of this spending pledges. But traditional Labour supporters just couldn't see how they were going to be paid for. And to a lot of people, Rebecca, it seems as though you are the continuity Corbyn candidate. You want to keep all of these policies.
Well, it's not the policies themselves that were the problem. There were a number of issues in this election. So Brexit, you're right, was one. Our voters didn't trust us. Certainly our Leave voters thought we were trying to overturn the result of the referendum, and many of our strong Remain voters thought that we weren't going far enough to have a close relationship with the European Union. Then we had an issue of trust on our policies, because there were that many being put out into the media during the election campaign that sometimes people felt overwhelmed. There wasn't a clear message that tied them all together and said, actually, the whole point of all of these policies is to improve your life in this way. It was kind of a little bit chaotic. And then we also had a vast number of policies within the manifesto, but we didn't pinpoint specific ones that would have been popular and just go out to sell them. So what you should do in a general election campaign is have an overarching message, pick out your best policies that are the big sellers, the big winners, if you like, and sell those. You can still have all of the other ones in a manifesto, because in reality, not many people sit down overnight and read through parties' manifestos from cover to cover. They just want to know what the main messages are that they hear about through the media.
Presumably,
and also there were other elements.
Presumably, therefore, that if you become leader, you will not want to keep the services of Seamus Milne, the Director of Communications, or Carrie Murphy, who ran the general election campaign.
Well, I'll have a completely new team. I think, it's important to have a new generation of socialists, if you like, in the leader's office in the party, and they'll be based on capability and expertise, as any, good, efficient office should be.
But without those two?
Well, I'm not going to name the people that are going to be in my office at this point, but it'll be a new team, that's all I'll say.
And just finally, you've been endorsed today by the PCS leader, Mark Sawatka, but he claimed the anti-Semitism row was created by Israel to distract from its atrocities. Do you welcome his support?
I think on the anti-Semitism crisis, it's widely recognised that we didn't deal with the issue as robustly as we should have done. And we went from being a reasonably sized party to a huge party within a period of years, and we didn't have a complaints process that was capable of dealing with issues that arose within the party. And that's not just anti-Semitism, that's all forms of racism, discrimination, sexual misconduct, you name it. And we didn't respond quickly enough. We didn't make the processes robust enough. And now I think whoever the leader of the party is going to be, whether that's me or one of the other candidates, we've got to take that robust action. And I've talked about having an independent complaints process to deal with all types of discriminatory complaints, so that people have faith that we have the gold standard of all party processes. And then once we've had that in place, I'd expect other parties to adopt a similar process.
But you're quite happy to have Mark Sawatka's support, him having said that in the past?
Well, Mark Sawatka is a brilliant general secretary in terms of what he's campaigned on and the political campaigns that he's drove forward over the last few years. But certainly on anti-Semitism, I'll say that we haven't tackled the problem within the party. I've been quite open about that.
Now, Rebecca, this is your first time call to LBC, I believe. Were you at all nervous?
It is. No, not of you and Dave, no.
Well, we'd love to have you back in the studio between now and the time that the result is announced, so look forward to seeing you at some point. And thank you for phoning in. That's Rebecca Long-Bailey. Becky from Salford, she's going to be known in the studios in the future.